forgot to mention the other day when I was talking about how I think the MT82 manual transmission is pretty soon going to go away in the Mustang GT. I forgot to mention the take rate. So when the new S650 cars came out last year, you know, initially the dealerships didn't have any inventory, right? But you have all these enthusiasts who know that the car's coming out, and so they go down and they place orders for them. So all of those first Mustangs that were produced were special orders, which means they were configured exactly the way that people wanted them. And they said that the take rate on the manual transmission was about 26%. All right, so they're selling 3 times more automatics than they are manual transmissions. And as time goes on, and you get, you know, all those enthusiasts have their cars now, so all that's over with, I would say that take rate is probably going to drop even more. So you might get to the point where 1 out of every 5 Mustangs has a stick shift. You know, we're talking about Mustang GTs here also, by the way. So, you know, when you consider that, you know, that's yet another point to make, you know, why Ford may want to get rid of the manual transmission in the GT, because, you know, they're going through all these warranty claims and, you know, just the R&D and everything to produce them, you know, and you're only selling a small fraction of them, you know. So I don't know. I mean, that's another thing to think about, but I don't know. I guess we'll see. Finally got the UPS delivery today. I had them send this second day air, so you can see the difference between the low profile handle, the one they call the race spec, and the standard handle. And I mean, there's about almost a half of an inch of extra height here on the standard handle. So that's all you need to be able to use your factory shift knob, or basically any shift knob that you want to use, you can use with the standard handle. And that's what we're going to be putting in today. Now, the cool thing about it is I don't have to reassemble this, because the new one came with the bushings in there already, this rubber isolator, new rubber isolator washer, new hardware that's already got Loctite on it. So all I have to do is literally bolt it back in and we're ready to rock. That's pretty cool. Like I was saying, I've got the main part of it here in the vise with a shop towel to keep it from scratching up everything. So I guess all I have to do then is just drop this in place. Kind of a tight fit, which is fun. Get the holes lined up right about there. Get my new hardware. I'm assuming that since this standoff that's in here is threaded all the way through, all I will need to do is get these started, and then once I start to tighten up one side, it should automatically tighten up the other side equally. But getting this thing started is proving to be just a little bit of a bear. I may have pushed that down a little bit too far. Let's try that. So yeah, once you get the old one apart, which ended up being a little bit more of a pain than I expected, it's going to be easy to put this new one back together, I think. Problem I'm having right now is just getting these little bitty screws started. Man, they're hard to deal with. And you know, it could be that I don't have this thing lined up perfectly, although it sure does look like that it is. I'll try that. See if that works. They're just not very long, and it's hard to get your fingers on there. All right, I got that one started pretty easy. There we go. I think it started. All right, so got my, what I say this was a 4mm. Got my 4mm and my Allen key here. Let's see if this works. Well, not exactly. Not really threading this one in. So I'm going to have to thread it in manually a little bit here because I want them to be sort of equal as they're going in. All right, let me finish tightening these up. Obviously, I got to do the bottom ones also, and then we'll go in the car, put this back in the car now. So you can see that with that taken apart, there's a spring here, and there's lubricant in the spring. So obviously, you don't want to disturb either one of those things. So just be careful. All right, so when you put this back in here, you see how that one side sticks out a little bit farther. Okay, that's going to be over to the driver's side like that when you put it back on. So I'm just going to carefully slide that back down into position. Now this is the standard MGW shifter with the standard handle. This is the tallest configuration that you can get from MGW for the MT82 transmission. But even in this configuration, it's still a 15% reduction in throw compared to the stock shifter. So that's pretty awesome. All right, now we need to find our bolt. Here it is. Right here. I don't know if you can see that or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick this through and we're going to start threading it in. That spring mechanism in there, by the way, the whole purpose of that is for your reverse function. So let me finish threading this in and then I'll show you the next step. All right, so what we're going to do is once we get it threaded to where it's all the way through, sticking out like that, see right here, you want it to be to the point where you can hit first gear and then go a little farther. I think I'm just about there. You want to get it just to the point where you can't actually hit first gear. I can still hit it right there. Huh. Gotta keep going. All right, there we go. All right, so then we're going to back it off a little bit. You want it to just barely be to where it'll let you hit first gear. And I think right there is it. All right, so now that spring will let me push down and go into reverse. See how that dowel goes underneath this piece? That's how that works. So this piece right here has to kind of be perfectly positioned to let you hit first gear and no more. Now that's set where it needs to be. All I got to do is put the jam nut back on this side and thread it down, making sure this doesn't move in the process. And I can start putting the boot and everything else back together. Okay, so now that I've got that bolt back in and it's positioned exactly where it's supposed to be for first and reverse to operate correctly, got the jam nut tightened down. So now I have moved on to putting the rubber boot back in. Now you can see this sound insulation stuff that MGW gives you with the shifter. I'm going to pull that back temporarily so I can see what I'm doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this boot on here and I'm going to push. See how it's got that lip around there that's double-sided so that it can seal off? So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it all the way through on purpose, and then I can just lift it up enough to get this top lip up on the top side of the sheet metal. That way I can do everything from the top of the car and I won't have to get under the car to check and make sure that that lip has sealed properly. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in here. Like I said, stuff it all the way down in there on purpose and then seal it back off when I'm done here. All right, got that sealed off. It was a little bit of a pain over here on this side because it's pretty tight, but you can see how that upper lip has sealed off all the way around there. So we're good to go on that. Now I can put my sound insulation back in here. Tuck that in nice and neat. This was on there. I don't think it's necessary, but it was on there, so I'm going to put it back on there. Maybe. When I have two hands free, I will. It's hard to do work like this and hold the camera and do everything. Okay. There we go. Now I can just flop the console back over, snap it in place, and put my shift knob back on, and I'll be ready to go. So now I got everything snapped into place. One thing I will mention is you're going to have to disconnect the wiring harness that controls these three buttons right here when you flop the console over out of the way. Make sure you don't forget to hook that back up. Otherwise, your hazard lights and your trunk release and all that won't work. But I got that reconnected. This is not snapped fully into place yet because I'm test fitting everything. But you can see now I can actually thread my factory shift knob back on here. And like I said, I just think that it looks better. Now, the MGW shifter had this spacer on there. I think that this spacer is only used when you use one of the cue ball style shift knobs, because where it's so much shorter, look how much shorter it is. I think that's what that's for, is to kind of take up some of that space and make it look a little decent. But I'm not going to put that back on there because with that on there, I don't know for sure if this will thread on. Even with the standard handle, I don't know if it would thread on if you spaced it out some more. So I think it'll work just fine like this. So there you go. That's how you change out the handles on these MGW shifters. Gonna need an assortment of basic tools, but it's not super hard to do. Just a little time consuming.